thank you so much to everyone for joining us today all over the world. I know we have signups. People are very excited about hearing about ABM, even though the ABM is not a new thing, strategically, and it's been around for a while, but I think the tools, the technologies, the strategies, the data that's out there today really makes it so that anyone has the power to be able to take an account-based approach to their marketing, sales, and customer success, right? But before we get started, maybe we'll just do a quick round of intros. Jen, if you want to kick us off. You're in where? Phoenix, Scottsdale, Arizona?
I'm in the Phoenix, Arizona area. Technically Goodyear, but no one knows where that is. So in Phoenix, I'm the VP of Sales and Marketing for SmartBag Media, and we're an intelligent inbound marketing agency, and we're a 100% remote team. So we're all over the US and Canada, and I get to work from my home here in Arizona.
Awesome. Annie, how are you?
I am doing well.
Thanks so much.
Oh yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah, I've been working with George and Jen now for the last several years. My name's Ann Gherini, and a lot of people call me Annie. I am the VP of Marketing at Affinity. We're a relationship intelligence platform. Really what that means is we take a team or organization's relationship graph and we put that right into the workflow, right into the pipeline. So it's incredibly powerful to know everyone on your team, who they know and how well. And it's really evolving how we think of a CRM. And so I'm going to talk today about how that incorporates with ABM and how we can use ABM better to meet our business priorities.
Awesome. So why don't we kick it off, Annie, since we're with you right now. What the heck is ABM, and why should I introduce it to my strategy today?
Yeah, I think ABM's, it's an interesting buzzword that's been going around for a while. I mean, technically we've been doing ABM in marketing for years. Account-based marketing is really all about an omni-channel strategy. The goal and the key piece is understanding who to go after, and aligning with sales, marketing aligning with sales to understand who to go after, and then coordinating on an omni-channel strategy to go after these key accounts in a really coordinated, strategic way. So instead of just cold calls and, banging against the door, you have this strategic, way that we go after these accounts in all different directions. And that leads to results that are much better than the typical kind of siloed effects of sales and marketing going after these various accounts and spraying and praying as we've done in the past.
Now, when you talk about sales and marketing alignment and omni-channel, what are some of the channels just for the folks out there? Because I know omni-channels really evolved, right? Omni-channel before was just like 2 channels. Now we have a ton, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's everything from, ad networks and being able to target ads correctly and being able to refine that targeting. It's email strategy. Now it's direct mail. We've seen this resurgence in direct mail with account-based marketing, which has been really interesting. Again, if you think back to the old days, and I was an advisor for the DMA, the Direct Mail Association. If you think back to the old days.
Wow. Is this at Sony?
No, this is so the DMA now is called I should get this right, the Digital Marketing Association, but they used to be called the Direct Mail. I joined them a couple years ago to help them out for their big conference and then. And the thing was, before they used to go after, direct mail was huge and direct marketing was huge. And now it's had this resurgence with ABM because if you use the data correctly, if you target the people correctly, you can go after the right people, spend the same money you went after hundreds of thousands of people, and go after this finite audience with that same dollars and really make a big impact. So it's, again, the opposite of spraying and praying, about refinement and really finding those, understanding who your target market is and really going after them.
And I know in sales, we talk about kind of like that target market or that refinement as the ideal customer profile or profiles for for all our sales folks on the line. Jen, what's your take on ABM? How do you define ABM, and why is it so important nowadays to really take that very strategic account-based approach?
Well, I think I want to echo everything that Anne shared. And then, in addition, it's about where we see success is when you're able to, excuse me, actually deliver a personalized experience to those companies that matter most. And regardless of if you are an enterprise type organization running a very strategic account-based marketing strategy, or maybe you're not selling enterprise, and maybe that's not as not going to be as beneficial. You're not going to be sending like direct mail to accounts because you're the cost of your the cost of that doesn't outweigh like what the revenue potential is. But in any situation, you want to make sure it's very personalized, it's very targeted, it's calculated, so that you're saying the right thing to the right person. And honestly, I mean, when I think about account-based marketing, I know I always view things through an inbound lens. So I always have that. But I think of account-based marketing as being truly orchestrated inbound, because no one wants to have anything pushed on them. For the most part, that's a generalization, but that kind of cold outreach. And so even if you're doing an account-based marketing approach, account-based sales, and you pre-identify like, these are our ideal customers and this is who I want to target, those people that work in those companies don't know that and don't care. So you still have to do things to kind of nurture them and bring them in like an orchestrated inbound fashion.
Got it. So when it's almost like account-based, from what I'm hearing, is account-based is really sort of this, Annie mentioned omni-channel, but it's this inbound. There's elements of inbound there that can be account-based, which Drift is doing. So I don't know if you've seen the new Drift functionality, but you could like set drift.com for everyone. Check it out. Drift is great. You can actually be able to set Drift to identify the IP of the visitor to your website, and then pop up the little chat avatar to speak to that account, and it literally says, "Hi, I'm Sally. I can see you work at FirstCut. I'm the person to contact you, or to be in contact with you about this." So it's so interesting. And then of course on the outbound side, when we're sending this to you and mentioned the direct mail, it's very targeted account-based stuff, which we've been doing for a while, and so I think it's this data and what has changed on planet Earth, in the ecosystem, in marketing today, that we have so much data. And how do we start to use that data to be able to set up these campaigns? Like what does that a campaign look like?
Yeah, and I think just to kind of to go back onto Jen's point real quick, I think that's really interesting piece, because you have to think of like how the customer is taking all of these marketing efforts that we're doing. And to the customer, as you mentioned, like with the example with Drift and with all the efforts coming in with inbound, it really feels kind of serendipitous as to how, oh, wow, I just heard about this company. Wow, they created great content. I just read something. And then when I go to the site, they, route me to the right person and they know who I am. So to the customer, it doesn't, you cross that line of being, utilizing the data to not be too creepy, but equally utilizing it to really be personal and to understand who that customer is. So your sales and marketing team can talk to them better. And that starts with inbound. It starts with content marketing all the way into the conversion funnel. And I think to your question of like, what's changed, a lot's changed with data. I think in the last few years, a lot of companies have gone out, kind of talking about how great their data is and where they're getting all this data and all the data scrapers that are out there. There is a lot of bad data that exists. So it's really important that as marketers, as business leaders, that we use that data properly. But we've had so many advancements, especially within AI. I look at what we're doing with Affinity, And we use communication streams, so email, calendar data as the main source of communication. And we cultivate these streams and are able to pull out, using natural language processing, the most important data points to understand kind of the connections and relationships. So when I think about it in an ABM perspective, it's understanding, do I have a path to intro to a particular client? If I do, or a particular prospect, if I do, then I have a better chance of closing them. Then I have a great opportunity to create great content for them, drive them inbound, and then be able to kind of leverage those referrals and intros that we know. All that data is now accessible. We've been sitting on it for years. And now we've gotten to the point where we've been able to cultivate it and actually create something useful from it.
You know what? Oh, can I jump in really fast?
Absolutely. Of course.
So,
please do.
So the other thing is customer expectations are changing. So our customers expect that we're going to actually use the data. So as customers become more sophisticated, and this is totally going to vary based off of your industry and who you sell to, right? So if you're the kind of, if you're selling to a marketer, like if you're selling to someone like Anne, you better use all the data that you have at your fingertips, right? Because like Anne, I'm sure we share the same kind of foundational expectations of, if I'm engaging with a team member in your company and then another team member reaches out, I'm irritated. Like, what, you didn't realize we were already communicating? Or I've already submitted this information. I've already filled out a form on your website that tells you that this is what I'm interested in. So why in the world are you reaching out to me about this other piece? So I recognize we're probably at like the more advanced level of understanding what data are the sales teams that are trying to reach us have at their fingertips. But that's going to just keep evolving, and customers are going to expect that you are going to use the data to have those personalized communications, or know, like, hey, every piece of content I've engaged with of yours has been video. So why have you now decided to send me this like 20-page white paper? I'm probably not going to read it. This is the kind of content I've been focused on. So I think we have to start changing the way that we work, because the customers are going to expect it.
Yeah, and I think from a data perspective, what's really interesting there too is, you know, we've gone back, like dynamic fields don't equal personalization anymore. You know, for a while it was like, oh, personalization equated to putting some dynamic fields in an outbound campaign, but that's not anymore. Now we have so much data at our fingertips that we're able to utilize that, to Jen's point, to create incredible inbound content, whether someone prefers, you know, one-sheeters, bullet points, or video, and be able to cater that to particular customers and to particular segments. So when we think about the different tiers of ABM, the top tier being that really finite group of, you know, leads or prospects that you're going after, that you have this huge coordinated effort. You know, the second tier, Engagio does a really great job of kind of breaking down these different tiers. But as you kind of strategically put that ABM strategy in place, it's really important to know how you're going after these different segments. And the bottom tiers, it's all about warming them up, and content does a great job of that. But understanding what is the content that this, you know, your ICP, your ideal customer profile, what's the content that they want to consume, and how do they want to consume it, and being able to learn from, you know, their consumption habits of the past, so you can feed them better content in a manner and on a channel that's gonna be received better.
You know, I can't help but sort of remember the demand gen principles from, you know, a couple years ago, when content marketing started to really sort of take off, and Pardot was doing so much. You remember them, and I remember sitting through like a bunch of demand gen workshops and stuff like that, and there was this specific sort of thing that stood out to me, or strategy, which was feed prospects content based on marketing scores, and if you remember that, and then where they're at in the buyer's journey. And it seems like ABM now is taking elements of that, so like taking all those principles from demand gen, and then also connecting and that being obviously inbound and marketing driven, but then aligning with sales and saying, okay, well, this is what we're going to do. This is how our data, we're going to share the data with you and we're going to connect with you to be able to align. Am I on the right track there? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in. Like, yes, absolutely. Like, you still use that kind of demand generation or like that kind of methodology with your ABM strategy. So when I think about like kind of the inbound methodology, you move customers through stages of awareness, consideration, decision, and then evangelism, right? So you research your buyer persona, document the journey the buyer makes, then create content for each type of persona at each stage of the buyer journey. So an account-based strategy, it takes that. It's a little bit more complex because you have to support that individual, but also be keeping your eye on the account or the company as a whole. So some of the elements change where maybe, you know, instead of doing lead scoring, maybe you're doing account scoring. But I think the place where we overcorrect with ABM is not thinking about the fact that there are individuals that make up a buying committee in your organization, and you have to make sure you're still treating those individuals, because you can't just make an assumption that this entire company is now at a different stage of their buyer journey, because you're going to have people who are going to be kind of leading the pack, and you're going to have people who are kind of pulling back. And that's why when you're generating content for ABM, you want to make sure that you've got a large kind of breadth of content that is going to meet the needs of the different members of the buying committee and the different challenges that they're going to have in embracing whatever your solution is that you're recommending.
Now, Jen, real quick, because first of all, thank you for that. How do you just, you don't have to get into too many details here, but you talk about the buying committee, right? And so, from a sales perspective, I've always been in sales until now. We've looked at this sort of what you discussed as, okay, here's the account plan. We have all these stakeholders. We have these people who I think are influencers. And you remember on the Salesforce opportunity record, we'd map these things out and et cetera. But we were never really strategic, right? About those messages, specifically sales. How do we start to understand the type of content and the channels that we should use when approaching the different stakeholders? And so, of course, the gatekeeper is going to get a different message than the influencer versus the CMO at the top, right? Yeah. How do we start to actually develop a strategy? And again, and then what around that, and what channels should we be considering?
So I'll give you a very tactical example from my last company. So when I was at Allbound, which is a SaaS platform, and we were a startup. We were new. We didn't have for the brand recognition that other companies have. Probably describes like a lot of people on this webinar right now. And so what we discovered as we analyzed our pipeline, and we analyzed our deal stages, is that we would get like great traction with our buyer persona, the person whose pain we were solving, right there, like most quickly, most effectively. But then ultimately, they couldn't just make a purchase on their own. They didn't have that kind of budget authority. So ultimately, that deal ended up on the desk of the CEO or the CFO in most cases in the organization, who was not part of the process. And any good salesperson will say, well, you have to bring those people into the process. Okay, sometimes they don't want to be part of the process, and they're not going to be part of the process, right? So you're not going to get their attention. So what we did is we went, how can we actually accelerate? How can we accelerate the pipeline? What's the big issue? And the biggest issue is the contract ends up on the CFO's desk or the CEO's desk. And the CEO, CFO is like, I never heard of this company. Like, who is this? Why do we need this? I'm confused. I don't know. I haven't wanted to be part of the process, but now I'm like blocking the process. So what we did is we actually used Terminus in conjunction with HubSpot. So HubSpot was our CRM and marketing automation platform. And we attached Terminus so that we could launch campaigns off of smart lists. So When we had a deal that moved to a certain stage, we then activated a campaign that would target the C-level individuals at the companies that we were in an active opportunity with messaging that gave them some brand awareness of who we were, and also spoke to ROI of what we did. And that way, when that contract came across that CFO's desk, he or she was like, okay, I have an awareness. Like they may not have been able to even like, get that or share that, but we knew they had an awareness because we started to see that funnel kind of move a lot faster.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting too. And both of you, I'm going to preach to you the choir here. Both of you are content experts, but it's really interesting how content has played in to the ABM game, because to Jen's point, we do something similar at Affinity as we kind of started to get into how we start warming up these bigger prospects. And what we'll do, or what I'll do, is use custom audiences on Facebook and use the videos that actually FirstCut created for us. Well, we did a bunch of
that, Annie.
We did a bunch of video testimonials, which worked really well. And we targeted that at key accounts. And what you're able to do by doing that is it's a very non-invasive way for the prospect to start learning more about your company, and to, especially for a new company, we're a Series A company. So it gives us credibility in the space as well. And we're able to deliver that message to them on, a channel in an organic way. In addition to that, I think to a point that Jen made, which is really interesting, is you also have to create content for, the evangelists within these companies. You have to create different content for the different people within an organization. So if you have someone who is kind of your cheerleader or champion in the company that's going to hopefully sell it up the flagpole, you need to create content that's easy for them to do that. And so I think that that's really important, because it's not only the content that gets their attention. It's not just the content that you use on social media or these other platforms to target at them, but it's also delivering that content that makes it really easy for them to go inside your organization and sell your product. And to get those key meetings with the decision makers, so you can, increase your sales velocity.
So since you're providing some great stuff there, what is your sort of secret sauce in terms of ABM within your organization today? Because I know you're doing a ton of it.
Yeah, and
I know I get targeted myself, and I use Affinity, so great.
Yeah, and I think that that's, we clearly dog food our own product, and that's really important in the startup world. Like, if a company's not using their own product, I think it's a huge red flag if they're, if they're able to. And for us, so what we do with utilizing Affinity's data is we're able to see, as I mentioned before, do we have a path to intro at these different companies? So if I look at 20 different prospects for a quarter that we really want to get into, it's aligning with our head of sales and understanding, here's our 20 prospects we really want to get into. And the first thing we do is we upload them to Affinity and are able to see, do we have a path to an introduction or a referral? Does anyone within our network of advisors, investors, our team, does anyone have a path to an introduction or a referral? So we can have that personalized, intro that's going to, that is just the most powerful thing that you can do in any type of enterprise sales. So really using the data at your fingertips. And Jen also made a really important comment that today we have this expectation that if one AE is talking to a company, it just looks so sloppy to have another AE going in there, and even if they're approaching someone else. And so again, that's kind of how we use our own product, because we built a product, a CRM that auto-populates based off of communication data. So you never have those kind of slip-ups where, oh, that person emailed them, 6 months ago, and now I look like a fool emailing them again without having context of that initial communication. So again, it is, hate to preach, just sit here and preach our own product, but the referrals, even if you don't use Affinity, understanding your path to an introduction or referral, tapping into your network however you can, is incredibly powerful in breaking that barrier and getting those first meetings.
So are we saying stuff like downloading our contacts from LinkedIn and putting it sort of, maybe different stakeholders within our organization will engage in that exercise as well, give us that data, and then use that data for targeting. And, of course we can use Affinity for that, but of course if we can do that, otherwise, no brainer. Jen, what's your sort of secret sauce there? I know, of course, that's essentially your business too, right? Is helping organizations figure out these approaches, account-based approaches. But if you don't mind just sharing a couple tips, 1 or 2 tips that you would give in terms of secret sauce.
Sure. I mean, aside from making sure that you're very much aligned with sales and that you're not just creating this in a vacuum, because so let's kind of like set that aside, and I know that's a whole other big old topic. From like a from a marketing perspective, making sure you are documenting the journey that buying committee is going to make, and then you're creating content for each type of persona that's part of that committee and along that journey, and recognizing that everyone learns differently. So I definitely have this approach because I started my career as a teacher, and I think there's a lot we can learn from education techniques for marketing. So, for example, some people are visual learners, some are auditory learners, some need to like actually see things or get their hands on examples. So what about your own learning style, that doesn't go away when you become an adult and now you're like working in the real world, right? So marketing and selling is a lot
You have to become adults, Jen? Come on. Look at me, please.
Well, adults can have fun too.
Okay, fair enough.
So, but I mean, it's making sure that you have a diverse but well architected array of content. So you've got your long form white paper content, your short form blog content, you've got the highly detailed explainer type of videos, you've got the short form quick educational videos, making sure you're satisfying every person that's part of that buying committee at the appropriate stage. And then the biggest thing is making sure also that you actually have a mechanism or a system in place so your team can use the content that you're creating. It's not enough just to create it and architect kind of the magic workflow. You have to empower and enable your team to use it.
And what are some of the tools that you're using to create the content, to more importantly track and A/B test and understand these are the personas in the system that are engaging with this type of content, so we're going to feed them more of this or feed them some other content, that sort of stuff? Do you have any recommendations around systems for that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you might think, okay, if I'm going to actually do account-based marketing, I'm going to need to get a whole other like tech stack, and that's just not the case. And especially if you're just getting started, you probably already have tools at your disposal to help power your ABM strategy. So you can use your CRM and your marketing automation platform for list segmentation, for company scoring, for nurture workflows. So, I mean, I know people know HubSpot as being an inbound tool, but it's really powerful. It could totally be the heartbeat of your ABM strategy. And I have case studies I can share. Asset management is really, like I mentioned, really important. So internally here, we use HubSpot's Sales Hub. I don't have this huge, massive team. If I had a bigger team, I would definitely want to use for written content, I would want to use a tool like HighSpot to enable my sales team to share the most appropriate content and what's relevant for those accounts. And for video, Vidyard is kind of my go-to. And then I've got like one more that's been really cool for us lately is Sigster. So a lot of folks don't think about like one-to-one emails that you're sending through like Gmail or Outlook as being like kind of part of your arsenal. But with Sigster, they have an account-based feature that's going to allow me to promote the content and the campaigns that are relevant to a particular audience based off of kind of what account list they're in. So those are kind of my top like high-level ones I've thought of.
And in terms of data, I know there's a bunch of systems. We started to use recently a company called Growth OK, and they actually give us lists that are very granular. So you know, give me a list of VPs of marketing in Arizona that went to these schools, that, you know, all those sort of things. Do you have any data? Because, you know, data seems to be that one sort of mega trend. And of course, we've known this with big data and so all the social data that's popped up in the last, 20 years, or specifically Facebook, which what was Facebook, 10 years now or whatever it is, I guess. No. Anyways, whatever. You know, any specific like data sources or that you would recommend?
The one I've used in the past, I've used Datanize to help build some account-based lists. So when we were targeting or like identifying our ideal customer profile, maybe we're able to identify that as a company of this size using particular technologies. So that might be a driver that, hey, if they're using a company that's using, let's say, Gmail, right, instead of Outlook, is more likely to kind of, you might see those trends. So you would kind of analyze your current customer base and then figure out like what technology trends. And then you could use a tool like Datanize to actually pull a list of companies that match those requirements. So that's one that I've used. I'm sure Anne has some examples too.
Yeah, I think there's a number of interesting companies. Just to add to the list, iData Labs is a really interesting company that's able to tell you based off, they do a number of things, but able to tell you, who are the customers of a particular company, which can be incredibly impactful if you're looking to go after competitors. They're also able to basically do, I know predictive has such a negative tone in the space, but they're able to do some really, really interesting stuff from a data science perspective on the predictive side to look at your instance within your CRM and be able to tell you where to go after. We also have used Clearbit. We have an integration with Clearbit and Crunchbase and some of these other tools that can help you kind of surface this data. But I think that the key thing to remember is so much of the data out there is kind of corrupt and bad that you have to kind of take some of it with a grain of salt on that sense. As for other platforms, I also use 23, which is a video platform that enables me to see which one of my prospects is actually integrated with, or actually has, it integrates with HubSpot and enables me to see which one of my prospects is actually engaged with a particular video or piece of content. And that's really helpful because as we're building out this team, then I'm going to be able to tell everyone in sales or whoever's handling that account, hey, this person engaged with this, video testimonial, this, animated video, and all these pieces of content to give them a better chance of selling and to get them a better chance of closing.
Jen, we have a question from one of the attendees regarding using LinkedIn InMail. Any best practices, any sort of feedback around that?
So, I mean, in general, I think, LinkedIn's InMail is obviously a really great way. If you don't have the ability to have like a warm kind of like referral, warm handoff from someone, and that's not an option for you, then, and you're not able to connect with them directly, it's a great way to kind of start a conversation. So it's not, personally, it's not a big part of my strategy of what I've done, but I have run sales teams that have used it for kind of prospecting in. My advice is to keep things very, very simple, value-based. And I know people have had a lot of success. It's a cold reach out. So I would say make sure that you have something. If you're going to go knock on this person's door, I consider sending someone an InMail would be the same as like if someone rang my doorbell right now, they better have something really important to tell me about something that I really care about.
Yeah, and I'll add to that because I'm pretty passionate about the outbounding space in general because I think so many people do it wrong. I think my sales team is sick of me telling them how much I hate outbound and cold emails. And I think the key here and that the difference between like the spray and pray methods of the past, to Jen's point, is this personalization key. So yeah, if you're going to take the time to write that email and using, whether it's using a tool like Outreach or, sending a direct email or using your CRM or something like InMail, I think they all can be impactful. But the thing with ABM, you're going after targeted accounts. So take the time, instead of just mass blasting them, take the time to personalize them. Understand something about, so if I'm going to try to sell to Jen, I'm going to look on Jen's social media pages, anything that's public. I'm going to read the posts that and especially if you're targeting marketing or sales, we're out there talking all the time. So I'm going to read the content that she's created, and I'm going to find something in there that personalizes the message. I get, especially when I was at, I ran the marketing at StumbleUpon, and I would get up to 30 cold, messages a day. It was crazy. And I just marked them all as spam because almost none of them were, all of it just used a couple dynamic fields, and they were these mass blasts. Now what I tell the team is like, the ones that broke through, the ones I actually read were the ones that, I have a column in Inc. So they read an article that I wrote, and they pulled out some tagline or, a quote that I had said. And, they used that in the subject line, or they mentioned a referral. They mentioned a connection that we had. Now I'll caution everyone on using LinkedIn, because I'm connected to 4,000 people on LinkedIn. I couldn't tell you who 40 of them are. So, but a true connection, and again, we go back and we use Affinity, but there's other ways to do this manually. A true connection can be really powerful. Something like, if you're going after Jen and me, mentioning my name can help you get Jen to actually open that email. You have to be cautious how you do it and tactful, but using that data that we have in an ABM effort, you're not just spraying and praying thousands of people. You're going after that finite list of people that you really have the best opportunity to sell to. So take the time and have the sales team take the time to write those personalized messages, and you'll have, much more impact.
Well, I wanted to add something here. First of all, thank you, Michelle, for the question. So Michelle, the panelist that asked, or pardon, the attendee that asked about LinkedIn InMail, and she mentioned that she's using personal sales videos right now. And I think that's so interesting, because there's a, of course I'm biased and I love video, but there is this, ability to use very targeted, specific type of content, video content, from a marketing perspective, ABM perspective, such as the customer testimonial videos. So, that's our core business at FirstCut. And, what I tell our partners all the time is, well, okay, you want, 6 testimonials, great. Who are those? First of all, who are those customer testimonials? How are you tagging them? How are they categorized? Are you using the same sort of segmentation that you would use in an ABM campaign or running ads? And it was so interesting, because I'm telling you, 90% of the folks I talk to, they're like, oh yeah, we didn't think about it. It's like, because they're so used to just creating a piece of content, putting it on YouTube, and then, or just running some very basics, geolocation or geo-specific ads on Facebook with some keywords and stuff like that. But they're not even thinking about, okay, well, of these 6 customers, are they all enterprise tiered? Are they mid-market? What verticals are they? That sort of stuff. And so, another way of really being able to, I think, align sales and marketing is saying, okay, well, here's, for example, video content or content in general, that it speaks to these specific types of customers that we have. As a result, we're now going to align with sales and say, okay, well, sales, here are the accounts that you can now, that we think makes sense for you to now to go and send an InMail or the personalized email. And then on top of that, so that the videos that marketing are generally putting out there are on brand, more professionally produced, etc. And then you can use stuff like Vidyard's tool for the one-to-one video. Michelle, that's a great one. Soapbox from Wistia has a really cool tool out there. There's a company called Videolicious that allows you to do some personalized video, easy, or pulling out your mobile phone, right, and getting the video, and hopefully you have some sort of system to upload that leadership has approved. But those sort of things now are totally personalized. So putting that video in, recording that video at your desk, assuming leadership approves it, and so on, which I think is happening over time now with all these self-serve tools. Yeah, and Michelle, I'll go ahead and put the Videolicious, Soapbox, which is a Wistia product, Vidyard. Yes, exactly, Vidyard. Thanks. Yeah, there you go. And so these are ways that these tools here are very specifically one-to-one tools, right? And so I think the rule of thumb that we've been seeing is, again, just to kind of make the clearer distinction, is marketing going to have these very specific, a little, more polished, on-brand pieces of content generally that are going to be one-to-many in many cases, but then using account-based data and tools to be able to, be more strategic around the approach, and then sales using these one-to-one tools to be able to really augment that. And I'm almost thinking like, and I'm a salesperson. I was a door-to-door salesperson in college. Like that's how I survived my entire life. So always been a salesperson, but I'm starting to think that sales now is almost is becoming a really truly a function of marketing, right? It's almost an extension, right? Especially because of this sales and marketing alignment. We had another question. Oh, pardon me. Go.
Yeah, I was just going to add to it of how we used our customer testimonial video and how we took an opportunity at Affinity to, we had an opportunity where Salesforce IQ was is being discontinued, and we are the closest product to Relate IQ, which is now Salesforce IQ. And so with that opportunity, we took a customer testimonial video that we had created using FirstCut. And we sliced it into a bunch of different pieces. And so that snippet that where a customer talked about going from Salesforce IQ to Affinity, we were able to snip that, use it not only in emails, in ads, in highly targeted ways to just the right accounts. So again, bringing this full circle. So pulling the accounts that we knew we had the best opportunity to sell into, which we knew were coming out of Salesforce IQ and people who needed to find a new solution. Empowering the sales team to go after them with the right content, warming them up on ads by targeting, doing video ads, by uploading these lists using custom audience on Facebook. And then creating multiple pieces of content that sales could use. And that has been incredibly impactful for us. So again, and I agree. I think that there's more opportunity to get to that one-to-one personalized video, but that is challenging for a lot of teams. But I think that using your content and producing really high quality content and thinking through as a marketer when you create it, what are, 10 different ways that I can use this one video? I can snip it into a bunch of different pieces. I can, upload it on social. I can use it in ads, and really getting the most value out of those dollars that you spend. Absolutely.
Repurposing that content. Absolutely. Michelle had a question, regarding ABM, the work of or the the work of, or involvement of ABM in product marketing, and any feedback around there. So I'm Michelle, if you want to maybe add a little color there, but I think the work, or I guess the question might be, how should product marketers be thinking about ABM? And I know that we work with a lot of product marketers. In fact, a ton of product marketers are actually doing all that customer specific marketing, case studies, those sort of things. Jen, do you want to kind of elaborate a little bit on so how do you see product marketing responsible for ABM? Thank you so much, Michelle.
So I would say there's no one part of the organization that is solely responsible for account-based marketing. So it's really kind of an overarching strategy, and everybody in whatever you do, everyone whether you're typically on the marketing or the sales side, you're going to play a role in that. So if I think about a product marketer and how a product marketer is focusing on how the features of a product or a solution actually help solve a pain, those you're going to be creating content typically around those feature sets that focus on a particular buyer pain or how you can help a kind of company. Like think about like the example that Anne just provided, right? Of you were targeting a very specific group of your potential audience. They were going to be moving from one type of tool, you know, potentially to yours. So some of that video that was a customer testimonial video, but from a product marketing perspective, you might want to create like some feature set explainers that show like the differences between these two products and how this is now going to actually be, you know, an upgrade from what you were using. So I don't think there's like ownership has to happen truly at like that, like a leadership level of who's overseeing revenue for your organization, but every single person on the team plays a role. Otherwise, if you just have like one sort of like siloed team in marketing who's responsible for account-based marketing, it will not be successful.
Got it. So, you know, we talked a lot about sales and marketing alignment. That might be one of the biggest fundamental sort of requirements or shifts that's happened, you know, because I think the underlying data has to be mapped, right? The marketing automation system, whether you're using Marketo, HubSpot, Eloqua, I mean, there's tons now, right? Has to be mapped. It has to be connected to the sales CRM, which most of the time is Salesforce as a database almost. And it seems like database or Salesforce rather is more the sort of hub for customer information that everything else is plugging into. And then you can plug in stuff like CRMs like Affinity and some of the other, you know, options out there. What are some tips that you would give? And I know you've worked very closely with salespeople, and you've had roles where you're like sales and marketing. I know it's stumbled upon you that you ran BD and marketing. So, and of course, Jen, you've done the same thing. It's so interesting because, you know, sometimes people stay on one side of the fence their entire career and, you know, they don't really get our suffering in sales. But
this is why we get along. We get along really well.
Yeah, that exactly. Totally. But yeah, what tips would you give, you know, sales leaders, marketers out there about better aligning, and the fact is that this is not like nice to have anymore. You have to do this stuff.
Yeah, and I think the key piece there, and like we practice this at Affinity, which is kind of the fun part of working at an earlier stage company, is you really get to change the culture from day one. And one of the key pieces is, breaking down these silos. And the big change from like how sales and marketing, especially in BD or in B2B was done in the past, is we're aligning on a revenue goal. That's our goal together, is like revenue at the end of the day. So before it was like, okay, marketing, you're driving leads, and sales, your job is to convert them and to close them. And, you know, and then customer success, your job is to deal with them after they come through the funnel. And there's a big issue there.
Customer success.
I know there's a big issue because, you know, if marketing's incentive is leads, well, then they drop in a bunch of garbage because then, I checked the box. I brought leads in, and sales gets, you know, mad at marketing because you brought in a bunch of garbage, and marketing gets mad at sales because you didn't convert it. And then customer success has to deal with whatever came out of the end of the funnel.
Customer success is in therapy the entire time.
I think you all are at the end.
Yeah.
So I think what's really important about ABM is sales, marketing, and customer success all come to the table and align on what those goals are, what those revenue goals are. So it isn't just revenue, but it's like, what are the ideal customers that we should be selling to and we should be putting through this funnel, however it's shaped. And then with marketing, it's not so much leads. It's really like focusing on, okay, our goal is bringing more opportunities. Our goal is these SQLs, these qualified leads. And I think that once you align together on what those goals are, you have much more success and you don't have that friction that you had in the past. So that's why you're seeing more and more sales and marketing teams working closer together. And that really gets away from this like tension of the past where just sales, marketing, and customer success all kind of had these family feuds within organizations. So I think it's really important to kind of all work together and kind of come up with those common goals and then figure out the best strategy to tackle them.
Awesome, Jen. What's your take? And I know you have this unique experience in that you've kind of like your last couple roles have run sales and marketing.
hmm It's all part of my master plan to have sales roll up to marketing.
Totally. Well, I get it now. I get it. Actually, it's interesting you say that, and I had sort of kind of joked around about it earlier, but I remember in college, and this was undergrad, and I was a psychology major, so I was trying to help like humans not be crazy. But anyways, didn't work. No, but I took a marketing class, and I remember in that marketing class, this was sales was actually a branch on the marketing mix, and that was what this instructor was saying, and it's again almost kind of coming true now.
Well, I've always been in my career, I've always been in a position where I'm at an organization where marketing's the driver, right? So when I was at NetTime Solutions, the company was hired. What the company was selling like over 90% through their channel, and they wanted to actually build a direct sales strategy, but they didn't hire a sales leader first. They hired a marketing leader to go and kind of build the path, right? And then make sure that we were building up kind of that brand presence and that demand for to feed sales. So that, I mean, that's really the way that I've always worked. But in terms of like tips of, okay, how can marketers align with sales, use these ABM principles? I think, we talked about kind of scoring. You want to make sure you're implementing company or account scoring instead of lead scoring. So we've mentioned a couple of times, like you're going to have like a number of decision makers part of the buying committee. So as a marketer, you don't want to put too much focus on the engagement of each individual contact for sales. So some of this is if you have been in a more kind of like lead-based program, you're going to have to change some of your KPIs. That means having leadership buy-in to say, all right, I'm no longer as a marketer going to be compensated based on the number of leads I drive. So I mean, that's a bigger conversation for, cultural conversation for the organization. And in terms of marketing deliverables, things you can start like changing today. Make sure you're not like blindly sending content out to a target list just in the hope that they're going to connect with a sales rep. So like to Ann's point, work together, strategize how you're going to reach out to these prospects, and come up with a workflow that involves marketing deliverables, but also like carefully organized tasks. Make sure it's personalized message templates, different calls to action. And you want to make sure you set up your marketing automation platform and the workflows so that someone doesn't just blindly move forward, but that it actually pays attention to whether or not that sales owner completed their assigned task as well. So the orchestration part of your strategy is really important to make sure that you've got that aligned with your goals.
Orchestration, that's a term that I've been hearing a lot now in marketing and sales. So that's super interesting. And what's, I know we have a couple minutes left here. What tips would you provide folks about getting started with account-based marketing? I know, they might start to have that aha moment, marketers out there, sales leaders, whereby they sit there and say, oh my goodness, like I've been doing this, sort of parts of this stuff, for a long time. Now I can sort of bring it together, put together this omni-channel, multi-channel strategy that has data informing everything that I do. What are some of those things that I can do now with the tools that are available today, with the omni-channels that are available today, just to start to get started?
Yeah, I think the first step is always going to be to have that conversation with the leaders, various leaders at the company. So it's really sales and marketing first coming together, and kind of you've got to get that buy-in to break down those silos. And like, yes, like what is our goal for this next quarter? Like in figuring out, okay, like what are those target accounts that we need to break into? So there's part of it is, yes, if you're selling to enterprise, that's one thing. Or if you're selling mid-market or even SMB, you might need some marquee logos, especially if you're trying to get into a new vertical or something like that. you can use those opportunities for ABM as well. Okay, so understanding what are those key accounts that you really want your team to break into. And you don't have to put all your eggs into like the ABM basket, so to speak. You can still continue to do some of your other, marketing and sales and marketing efforts, but, test out a little bit of ABM in a quarter and understand, okay, here's the accounts we want to go after. Here's the different ways that we can go after them. And, again, an hour isn't even enough to go through like all the strategies and details of ABM and that whole coordination piece. And, like I said, I think there's the number of companies, Terminus, Engagio, who do a great job they have a ton of content of how they recommend doing step-by-step in the process. But yeah, you can do it. You can kind of not necessarily dip your toes in, but like take the time to build a strategy to try to test out ABM and go after these accounts in a more strategic way. And I think that that's really important. But at first, first step is all about that conversation with the leaders of the company to get that buy-in, because a marketer or a sales exec can't go at this alone. There's just no way. So getting people bought into this mentality of the different style of doing things is always going to be the first approach you need to take.
So there's a new topic real quick. This is sort of a curveball, but I thought it was important. The GDPR stuff that's been coming out now. And I think this is more important than ever. Like I totally spammed a bunch of people a couple months ago, and I wasn't intentionally spamming, but I realized I was using old school inside sales tactics that just don't work anymore, right? And so as a result, I started to find out my emails were going to spam, and so I got it. I understood it. As soon as I looked at my emails and I spent some time when I realized like customer emails were going to spam, I was like, okay, after freaking out, I sat down and said, okay, we really have to get strategic, and now with data privacy issues that are in compliance that's coming up now, especially with GDPR. And I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit and how you as a marketer are starting to think about GDPR, and then maybe if you can elaborate. We have about 3 minutes left, so just as a time check.
And I think that those are two really interesting pieces, because spam is something even outside of GDPR. Mm-hmm. GDPR, so I wrote an article in Inc. about it 2 months ago. That kind of elaborates if anyone's interested in like learning more about these regulations. So the European Union regulations around data privacy, which are now going into effect here in May.
Yeah, the 25th, I think it is.
Yeah, and so a lot of companies, you don't realize there's so many US-based companies that are affected by this who didn't realize that they are. So now, anyone from, the rules are, they're principles, so to speak. So it's not as cut and dry. That's what makes it pretty difficult to figure out. But there's a lot of things like how we cookie users that are from the EU, how we, message them via email, how we collect their data, what we do with it. So we have to rethink how we utilize data in general. And even though right now it affects just those in the EU or those that are targeting people in the EU, or in the UK, but it's also, there's all these repercussions that are going to affect all these US companies. And it's something that we just need to be aware of, because I think we've taken it a step too far of how we've kind of taken advantage of our prospects and customers and kind of stepped over the line and from a data privacy perspective.
GDPR is forcing us to be better. And it's forcing us to be better with the way that we respect the privacy of our future customers. And so for anyone who thinks, oh, this doesn't apply to me, right? A, to Anne's point, it probably does. You just don't know it. And B, just think like, don't you want to be the better marketer? Don't you want to kind of take care of your customers in the best way possible? And if you think that it's not going to come and affect you at some point, you got your head in the sand.
Got it. Well, thank you so much. I think we're going to wrap up here. Thank you so much for your time. I know it's 9 a.m. San Francisco startups, especially when we've been up till 5 crying. That's just me, I guess. No, all jokes aside, thank you so much for your time. If folks want to get in contact with you, follow you, I know you're writing on on a variety of different publications, Inc. magazine, etc. What's the best way to get in contact with you and follow you and maybe connect with you?
Yeah, so my Twitter is Annie, ANNIEG, or you can email me at ANNE @affinity.co.
Awesome. Jen.
Oh yeah, Jen Spencer on Twitter, or you can find me on LinkedIn. But if you do connect with me on LinkedIn, please tell me that we met here. That'd be awesome. Or jspencer@smartbagmedia.com.
Awesome. And thank you so much to all the attendees out there. I know that your time is limited and sacred, so very much appreciated. David, Adam, Michelle, all the panelists who asked questions. If you have any questions as well regarding ABM and or alignment between sales and marketing organizations, please feel free to reach out, and have a wonderful day, everyone.